Hello and welcome to Bookish and Unbalanced, the podcast that talks all about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Adrienne J. Smith.
I'm Amy Spencer.
And I'm Katie Trapp.
We all have a state of mental health and we neglect talking about it, or worse yet, we're ashamed to talk about it. So let's break that stigma. On today's episode, we're interviewing the author Sophie Stern, and we're excited that you're here with us. I enjoyed getting to know you this past spring. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I know who you are, but I'm going to assume most people don't, that listen to us, particularly, I think, because our audience tends to skew much more heavily into the sapphic sphere. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about the books that you write?
Absolutely, yes. So I'm Sophie, and I write a little bit of everything. I write romance, I write sci-fi, I write zombies. I can't stick to one genre. I just have too much fun with storytelling. So I do tend to bounce around. And my characters do tend to be bisexual or pansexual most of the time. I do have a zombie series where I have a lesbian couple, which was super fun to write. And then right now I'm writing a romance series that's featuring vampires. And they're all bisexual and they are polyamorous. So that has been a fun new challenge that I've just had a really great time with.
You tend to write characters with some form of trauma or depression. How have you used your writing for your own emotional processing, and what benefits have you found with that, like connecting with your characters?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I definitely really enjoy writing characters who have PTSD or depression. Not that I like casting that upon my characters, but I feel like those are really important things for us to see in books. And I know for me, when I read a book, I want to have characters that are realistic, that are relatable, and whose lives haven't always been perfect. So for me, when I'm going through something in real life, I think that I tend to infuse those emotions into my characters, even when I'm not trying to. So I know it's really easy for me to be like, what? No, I don't emotionally deal with trauma when I write, but I think a lot of us do. And sometimes I'll go back and read like a book that I wrote a long time ago, or even like a specific scene, and I'm like, I remember that day. Like, I remember how I was feeling when I wrote that. And it was really helpful to get that out on paper.
I think you're right that a lot of us tend to do that, the trauma processing on the page. And I also love to see characters that kind of represent more reality. I get reading as a fantasy, right? And we want to disappear into the characters in the world, but I also don't want it to be so fantastical that I can't relate.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which is why I really appreciate having those aspects in books for sure.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I feel like when you read a story and the character's life is just so perfect, I just get mad with jealousy. I'm like, no, I'm done. That's fine.
Like, what utopia is this?
See, I'm fine with reading those kinds of things because I don't like getting anxious while I read.
That's really sweet.
This is coming from the person who, like, you kill off a character in every book, Katie.
But it's different. It's different, okay? There is a difference between like a murdered leprechaun and like these two people who have like years and years of trauma that they're trying to work through and end up just hurting each other in the process. Like there's a huge difference.
I'm fairly sure the leprechaun found it quite traumatic. I'm not
crying.
gonna lie.
If he had met, he'd be fine with it. He was a jerk.
I'm sorry, have you actually killed a leprechaun?
In
She
my
killed a
book,
leprechaun. Yeah. You've just
The book.
I have tears.
It was in the book. Yeah.
It's not as sad as real life feeling stuff.
Thanks for clarifying.
See, I don't mind the real life feeling stuff, because if I'm feeling it for another character, I'm not feeling it for myself. So it's fine. I can ignore my own trauma because I'm feeling the pain of someone else. And AJ's got a look on her face as if to say that's.
I'm not sure I believe that. Have you never gotten like smacked in the face when reading a book with the character's trauma and you've been like, oh, I see how that played out?
I don't know what you're referring to. I have no sudden epiphanies at any moment about my own mental health state whatsoever.
Sarcasm is strong.
Here for it.
What is the biggest impact writing within the queer community has made on you and your mental health?
Okay, sorry, I'm still crying from the earlier laughter. I would say for me, the biggest thing that I really appreciate about the queer writing community is just the togetherness. And having people who understand not only what it's like to be a writer, but what it's like to navigate the world of writing that so often tends to be straight. A lot of writing groups don't understand the different things that a queer writer experiences or that we kind of have to deal with. And Adrian and I actually talked about this recently on a panel, which was really fun, like a writing panel. And we talked a little bit about even marketing your book is going to be different when you're writing sapphic fiction or writing queer fiction. The way that you interact with your readers is going to be different. And so for me, being in the queer writing community has been very positive because it's a group of people who not only understand writing, but who also understand me and the things that I've gone through. So I have a very good and positive opinion of the writing community.
Yeah, we did talk about that a lot on the panel. I forgot that we talked about marketing because it is vastly different. Just in like practicality, what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And then also
yeah, absolutely.
I think this is slightly off topic, slightly not, you know, it always bugs me when you see all those like marketing gurus or whatever, and they're like, just run Facebook ads. And I'm like, and what would you like me to target? Because if I target just writing or reading, like romance readers, I can do that, but I can't target the people that are actually going to read my books.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I would also say, you know, I write queer horror too. Even in that, I have found, even if the point of my book is not this person is gay, people will get upset that I have gay characters in my zombie books. And so I found that if I add, you know, a disclaimer, this book has LGBTQ characters, people who are queer are not going to be turned off to the book by that. But people who do not want to read a gay character will know this is not for you. Because I recently got a review, and I think I told Adrian about this, where it was a 3-star review. It was like, I loved this zombie book, did not like that there were gay people in it. And I, you know, of course I protested to Amazon, and they were just like, well, people can have their opinions, you know, but even marketing like that, something that's not a romance, becomes a lot more complicated.
Yeah, but when you're writing within the community, right, and you're heavily set within that community, I think that's in part why I am more inclined to market within the community than I am without, because I run into less of the negativity and less of the hate.
Oh, absolutely.
So within writing within the gay writing community, is there a stigma with you being bisexual and pansexual as a writer, or is it more widely accepted?
So I haven't really experienced a lot of stigma in the writing community, not in the queer writing community. I have found that other writers tend to be very accepting and okay with that. I have found more of a stigma in the greater writing community of, oh, if you're going to write bisexual characters, you have to prove how gay you are. I've gotten that kind of feedback from other writers, which is very uncomfortable and very weird for me. And so I do tend to just label myself as queer because I have found that people do not ask me as many questions. Whereas if I'm like, oh, I'm a bisexual writer, then it comes up, oh, but aren't you with a man? Or aren't you this or aren't you that? You don't fit into the box of what we think a bisexual author should look like. So I do think that within the queer writing community, I do think that I have felt very accepted. It's just the greater writing community that has been a little more uncomfortable for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And what is a bisexual supposed to look like?
I don't know. That's why I'm so bad at it. We didn't get a book.
I love that question. Because yeah, it is. What are we supposed to look like?
Yeah.
I have found being pansexual within the sapphic community not as welcoming. But when I have written polyamory or why choose, that is, people are far more open to that in that sphere. But within the sapphic sphere, it's not, it's becoming more that way, but it's not, it's not welcoming at all.
Yeah, I could see that. I was thinking about that question earlier too, and I wonder, I'd love to know your opinions. I wonder how much of that has to do with like public representations of pansexuality or bisexuality in media. And I was thinking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer and how Willow started out, dated a man, and then dated a woman, and everyone said she's not bisexual, she's a lesbian. She cannot be bisexual in this world. And I was thinking, you know, we didn't really have, like in the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of representations of people who were bi or pan. Do you think that plays into that experience of why it's not so accepted?
I think it primarily comes from a fear mentality and a scarcity mentality. And I think that is on both sides, whether it's a female identifying or male identifying, or whatever identifying. I think it actually primarily comes from almost a fear of polyamory in a sense.
Oh, interesting.
That it has to be one, right? And I think it comes from just also, particularly in our society and American culture and Western culture, growing up with a binary, right? You kind of have to choose one or the other. And there really is not a gray space or a middle space or any kind of spectrum, right? And I think we find that in a lot of other things as well. I think when it comes to the sapphic community and it not being as accepted, there might be like a patriarchal element to it, in that there's an understanding that why would you choose a man who's patriarchal and will stick you in that societal norm when you can have something outside of that they are so proud and have worked their butts off for, right? And having that recognition. Like, I think they see it as a threat to what they have built and worked so hard for, instead of just another aspect of the community.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense.
So that's my opinion, but you should ask the other people that are not on the bi-pan spectrum.
Floor's open.
I think media has a massive part to play in it in some respects, because I mean, especially over here in the UK, like you'll see on I don't know, soaps or dramas or whatever, a character who has been, you know, initially written as straight or introduced as, you know, straight, coming in and then having like, I don't know, a same-sex relationship, and then, as these things always do, you know, like a year in these programs, it's like 10 in reality, and so then they move on to the next relationship, and they'll very much go back to their original kind of, you know, so their next, and then it's kind of never spoken about, so it's always kind of like playing into that kind of like, it's a phase kind of mentality. Do you know what I mean? And I think that kind of really plays on it sometimes. Like, it very rarely will a character kind of like be like, you know, be bisexual or pan and explore that in kind of, you know, a way which is probably more realistic. It's used as kind of, you know, a character arc.
One of my favorite representations of that is the investigator chick from The Good Wife. I can't remember her name, other than the fact that she's
something.
But she is probably one of the best bi-pan representations I've seen in media. Oh. But I mean, for anybody watching Bridgerton, since it's a huge freaking thing going on right now, and this is a spoiler, so if you haven't seen it, turn it off, whatever. The very last episode.
You can't tell people to turn off your podcast.
I can. They can come back.
Fine, because it won't get aired till like August, and if you haven't watched Bridgerton by the time this episode gets aired, then it had been spoilt by any other number of like things.
Yeah, but at the end of the very last episode, there's the character Francesca marries a man, but it's also very clear that she's into her new husband's cousin. And in the books, the cousin is a man, and so they gender swapped the cousin, and that's her true love story. And so it's very clear that Netflix is going to take this into a sapphic, bisexual, pansexual something sphere. And the amount of upheaval and anger coming from that, but not coming from Benedict's exploration of being bisexual and wanting to be with a woman and a man, is vastly interesting. And just the difference between those two, and one being accepted and one not being accepted. And the only difference really is the gender.
And I think, leaning back to your previous comment about in the sapphic community, it like it's a patriarchal thing. I think like it's the mentality of, and I'll do my air quotes again, taking the easy choice, because why would you know, subject yourself to a life where you could constantly be judged by being in a same-sex relationship, when I could just do the easy thing and be in a heteronormative relationship.
It's fine. We don't,
because they're so easy.
Don't get judged by both sides. Anyway. Katie just skirted right out of that question. She's like, I'm not.
Yes, just.
Well, I was going to mention that last part, because I do think there's some, I don't want to say bitterness, but I think there is some bitterness to viewing it as, I've had to, you know, work this hard because you can see that my partner is female, and then they see it as you haven't had to if you're with a man, and it just feels bitter. Like, it just, how dare you? I think that
I almost hate to use the comparison, but it's kind of almost like an invisible disability and a visible disability, right? Like, you can visibly see somebody in a wheelchair and know that they have suffered, but if somebody's struggling with bipolar, you're not going to see that that's what they're struggling with.
Interesting.
I don't know. That was a lot of food for thought.
You know, what would help is if we all just didn't judge each other. I feel like that would solve a lot of problems.
We didn't ask for logic.
We solve more than just this problem, that's for sure.
You do a lot of in-person writing events. How do you manage to keep your mental health going strong during those events, especially when they don't always turn out as expected?
Okay. Yeah, I do go to a lot of events, and I would say that the vast majority of them are absolutely fantastic. I leave feeling great. And for me, they're like a big boost for the year, especially with the day-to-day process of writing. Like we all know that can be kind of disheartening sometimes and overwhelming and lonely, but getting to go to book events is usually a very, very fantastic experience. I usually feel like very energized and excited by interacting with other authors and readers. But as you said, they do not always go as expected. And Adrian is smiling because I think that we're both thinking of the same event this year. That wasn't super fun.
Yeah, but I didn't want to bring it up by name.
I will not bring it up by name. That's okay. I would say for me, if an event doesn't go the way as planned, what really helps me, this is so cliche, and I don't want to say like look for the good, but I try to focus on what my goal was going. And for me, my biggest goal is getting to interact with other authors and getting to interact with readers. So if an event is crumbling and not working out well, I try to kind of look for those opportunities where I can still hang out with other authors and find those elements of goodness even when it's very chaotic. Um, but I also have found that for me, um, a lot of anxiety is reduced with planning in advance. So if I know authors who have been to an event, a lot of times before I go to something, I will reach out to them in advance and be like, hey, what did you think? What do you wish that you had known? Because a lot of authors can give you insight, even if it's something like, oh, hey, if you can't walk upstairs, there's a lot of stairs at this event. Oh, if you know someone in a wheelchair, this one event is not great, but this other one is perfect. So I have found that kind of pre-planning and just reaching out to other authors is really helpful too.
Yeah, I find that build up anxiety before worse than the event and after anything.
Yeah.
And I am the one that will wait to the last minute to pack because the to-do list is like 500
Oh,
miles.
yeah. And it can be a lot, especially if it's an event that I haven't been to before. Like you're so right. Like the to-do list gets really long. And sometimes book events are at places where you don't have easy access to like food or coffee. And so a lot of times it's those little details that you really do have to like think about, but then try to be flexible and pivot when you need to.
I think being flexible is really key there. And just kind of going with the flow. Like having a plan to begin with is fantastic, but then also just kind of being able to go with the flow and say, okay, so this is
Oh,
happening.
yeah.
So X, Y, and Z can now happen, you know. I think that's true among many things in life. But going to author events for
All
sure.
right. So what we've learned is don't judge people and be flexible.
I think I just finally got one. Those into window moments, you know, when y'all get something and I don't. Ames is over there trying not to laugh every time you say flexible. I think I got it.
I actually wasn't trying to laugh at anything at that point, or trying not to laugh at anything. So this was just my face this time around, Katie.
You started smiling when she said that she needed to be flexible.
I was smiling. Do you know why I was smiling, actually? Because it reminded me of a conversation we all had in the group chat a couple of weeks ago, where we all went, I used to be really good at planning stuff. And now when something goes out of plan, like something happens which throws that plan off, I get really, really upset and I don't know how to pull it back. And I was just like, being flexible is not a strong suit.
Yeah, so there is a correlation between inflexibility and anxiety. Not that I'm calling you out, Ames, at all. And
Fine.
the more anxiety that you struggle with, the more inflexible you are. So the harder it is to be able to pivot when something goes out of plan. That's, I think, what we were actually talking about.
Yeah, that was it. And
Um,
I'm fully aware that I'm very anxious and inflexible, so it's fine.
which I think is what can make author events hell, frankly, for people with anxiety, because nothing, and I think Sophie, you can talk to this too, nothing ever goes 100% to plan at those events. Like, there is something that will
Oh,
change
yeah.
and be different, and you kind of have to anticipate and expect that. And when you're struggling with a
Yeah.
lot of anxiety, going into those can be really tricky.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, like you said, like there's always something that doesn't go according to plan. This is going to sound insane, but last year I went to an event and realized I did not have a pen. I had not brought a pen to a book signing event. And so luckily there were other authors who were happy to give me their pens, but there's always something that's going to be forgotten or something that goes wrong. So yeah, it can be tricky and stressful. But Amy, I hope your event this weekend is amazing. We all believe in you and think you're going to do a great job.
Katie and AJ are just going to have like the first 3 days of next week of me complaining about me being absolutely exhausted and out and just peopled out because I'll be a wreck.
We'll
I
also,
might come around by Wednesday.
we will also probably have like 500 million messages in Messenger going, why am I here? Why did I agree to this? You should have told me no. To be fair, though, I think you signed up for it a long time ago. I don't think it was a recent thing.
Yeah, no, I did sign up for it a while ago. Not that would have made any difference, because I probably still wouldn't have listened to you, and then I'd have blamed you all for not giving me good advice anyway. But
Okay, that's why we're here. What do you wish more from when it comes to the queer book community and mental health?
I think what I would want more from the queer community and mental health would be honestly just more books where there's characters who are going through lots of different things. I know we talked a little bit about anxiety in book events, like characters who deal with anxiety in normal everyday situations, who maybe have to do a little extra planning because they have things that they're dealing with, or situations that they're facing that other people might not be. And I would say just more support from other authors in general, and being able to connect with authors and talk about these issues. I know there are a lot of author groups now, which is great. There are more and more every year. When I first started writing, there was nothing. It was like one message board that you had to dig for. But yeah, I think we're getting closer every day to having that greater community. And honestly, I think what's happening today is so cool. Having your group reach out to authors and be like, hey, let's talk about these things. I think that's amazing. And I think that's going to be a really great resource to people who want more from the writing communities.
Just talking about it in general, I think, really helps with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it helps people not feel alone, because when you don't talk about things, you feel like you're the only person that's ever dealt with whatever the issue is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is your personal experience with mental health? The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, whatever you want. And you can go as in detail as you would like, or as
Yeah.
detail less as you would like. We require no details.
Okay, amazing. So one thing that I would like to talk about is, for me, I grew up in a very small, very conservative community where people told me there was no such thing as depression. And I grew up in this community where it wasn't talked about. If somebody's dealing with depression, they just need to get over it. That's not real. And then I had a baby and I had postpartum depression super bad. And I didn't know how to get help. and I didn't know that the things that I was experiencing weren't normal. Luckily, I had a great doctor who realized what was going on and was able to provide me with some support and help me figure out what my next steps were. But at the time, you know, even like the moms in my mom's group, like nobody wanted to talk about feeling sad after they had a baby. Nobody wanted to talk about the downside that can come from feeling, you know, depression after you have this beautiful child and you're supposed to just be like elated with joy. What how to feel that way? So that was definitely a very, very difficult time for me. And I really think that if I had more knowledge about the signs of depression and what they can look like, and an understanding that it can happen to anybody, I think that would have been very helpful for me.
And just the spectrum of depression, right? It's not the I can't
Yeah.
get myself out of bed in the morning or any time of the day, or I just live in my bed and bed rot, right? But the
Yeah.
nuances to the different kinds of depression that happen. I think no, like it's such a spectrum, and everybody only talks about one side or the other side.
Oh, yeah.
We're back to that. It's fine.
Yeah, I think we said before, like, I certainly like think I know what my depression looks like, and then get into a nice steady stream and I'll be fine and everything's, you know, I'm in a good place, and then I'll start to feel, I don't know, sick or ill or whatever, and it's like, yeah, my depression's just come and smacked me on the side of the head and went, you thought you knew what was going on? Oh no, here's a new symptom just to really mess with you a little bit more. Because I think, like, I certainly like I'd done depression and then had a baby. So when I had my baby and then was kind of like adjusting to this strange new life where all of a sudden there was, you know, something that was relying on me, but it was so really like the first 2 or 3 months after having a baby, if everything, you know, goes to plan and goes well and stuff, is actually a really kind of weird, vague nothingness of, because the baby's not doing anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not doing anything because you're not working. The baby's not doing anything because it's just been born. So what do you, and I put my mental health at that time, the way I was feeling at that time, down to the adjustment from being from work and really busy to doing nothing all of a sudden and just not knowing how to adjust to it. And then it was only like a few more months down the line that I kind of really realized, once I'd gone back to work, forced myself back to work earlier because I thought that would fix the problem. And then and it didn't fix the problem, that I kind of then went, oh, okay. Well, no, it wasn't like a oh, okay moment. It was more there was more screaming and crying. Then I realized that actually this is another facet of my mental health. This is another way that it's manifesting itself. And I think we kind of sometimes think we know what's going to happen and we can look out for those warning signs, which we absolutely can. Like, sometimes it's really obvious, like, you know, that something's off balance, but sometimes it's something totally new and weird, and it can kind of really like throw you off a little bit then, because you're like, oh, I didn't realize that's what it was. And so I'd ignore that symptom because it's not going to be anything but, you know, a stomach ache or indigestion, until I end up in the hospital because I think I'm having a heart attack, and it turns out it's just another form of anxiety. That was this year's true life story. There you go.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how I think you're totally right. I feel like anytime we get into this idea of, oh, I've solved it, I figured everything out, life always tends to throw us curveballs, and we're like, okay, we have to adapt, got to be flexible and figure out this new thing.
We've worked out that I'm not good at that flexibility thing already, so
It's kind of like parenting, right? You kind of figure it out, and then like 3 months happened, and it's like they're a whole new person and you're like, what the crap? Now I have to figure this whole new That's how I feel about parenting today. Thank you for my TED Talk.
That's valid.
Okay, so we finish up with some rapid fire questions. So first thing that comes to your mind, there's some fun ones in there. So what's your dream destination vacation?
Tokyo.
Well, I don't think we've had that one yet.
No, we haven't had Tokyo yet.
That's where my husband wants to go. That's his dream destination vacation.
Very cool. Must be a cool place then.
I wouldn't know. I've never been there.
What's your trope, whether in your relationship or you as a person?
Just one bed. That's my go-to. That's my favorite. I love that trope.
Where did you see kindness today?
I saw kindness from Adrian this week. That would be on Friday. Adrian. Adrian's a very forgiving and kind person, and it really means a lot. At the fact that you were so nice to me really carried me through the weekend. So thank you for that.
What's your philosophy on good mental health?
I think that we have this idea that we have to be perfect and happy all the time, and that's not realistic, and it's putting an unrealistic expectation on ourselves. I think that if we're facing any kind of mental health issue, whether it's something that's really serious or maybe just an inconvenience, I think there's a lot of steps that we can take, but I think one of the biggest steps is letting ourselves not have to fit into a box. I think that we should stop trying to force ourselves to be a specific way, and we need to stop this idea that there's only one way to have a good life.
Well, we still got one more question. Where did you find joy this week?
Honestly, I found a lot of joy from books this week, which, I mean, we're writers, so that's kind of cliche, but I have been reading a lot. I read like 3 books this weekend, and it was so relaxing and just made me feel really joyful. Also, I did see a rabbit in my backyard today. So that is always a win in my book.
I sent my son to church camp this past weekend, and I don't know what it is about this church camp or where it's at, but they have these things that they call squabbits, and it looks like a mix between a rabbit and a squirrel. It is actually a squirrel, but it looks like a squirrel rabbit, so they call it a squabbit.
That's so cool. I
I
love
know,
that.
right? And they're
I'm gonna have to Google.
black. I don't know what they're actually called, but that's just what the campers call them.
That's really cool. Oh, hey, our friend is back. Hello.
Just in time for the ending.
That's good. Thought I'd just show up for the last bit.
Okay. Okay, folks, that's all for our latest episode of Bookish and Unbalanced. We would love to thank Sophie for sharing with us today. We also want to thank our listeners for tuning in and getting to know Sophie just a little bit better than before. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to keep up to date on our latest episodes. Until next time, take care out there, and remember, we're all in this together.
And so now we throw paper. The knife is frozen again.